The Cowboys brought back their top 4 safeties from the 2024 season. But that's not maybe a great thing. We'll explain why next.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Welcome back. I am your host, Markquese Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. And joining me today, as always, is Landon McCool. You can follow him on Twitter at McCoolBCB. And on today's show, we are wrapping up our training camp preview as we're just days away from the Cowboys actually kicking it off in Oxnard. Unless you want to do a whole show on like long snappers and punters and kickers.
I was thinking about it. How can we get 27 minutes on how good a holder Brian Anger is?
The importance of CJ Goodwin for the 17th year. No, we're not going to do that. We're going to finish up with the safeties. And let's talk about the starters. Yeah. Donovan Wilson, Malik Hooker. This is the same starting duo for the last 4 years now, 3 years. They've been together for a minute. How do you feel about this pairing going into 2025?
It's hard to kind of gauge it because I do think that last year both of them took a step back a little bit. As they are getting both a little bit older, is it that they're getting a little bit older and it's time to kind of transition away from them? Or is it that they were playing in a completely new kind of defense that specifically probably affected them as much as anybody on the defense, on the back end specifically? It's hard to know. And I think that the Cowboys go into the situation with a lot of uncertainty of, hey, does the transition back to coverages that they might be a little bit more familiar with mean a improved level of play, a return to something that we saw in 2022 and 2023? I don't know. I think that's a big question. And then I think the contingency plan there is the backups that we'll talk about a little bit later, but there's still, again, another pairing that we are obviously really familiar with because they've been with the team for 2 or 3 years as well. So it's interesting that you've got so much familiarity on the team coming back, but so much unknown really kind of surrounding exactly how they're going to play.
It's really rare in the NFL now to have a starting safety duo that has been together for 3 or 4 years. Like that just doesn't happen very often in the NFL. So that's a good thing. Having two guys that have played next to each other, across from each other, that's a good thing for Dallas. I want to start with Donovan Wilson because I think I guess I was thinking that the change from Dan Quinn to Mike Zimmer would actually help Wilson because he would be, at the line of scrimmage more. Maybe we'd see him blitzing more. And he was effective as a pass rusher, but it seems like we saw his coverage ability and his just playmaking overall take a big step back.
Yeah, and I think that maybe we were right in some ways and wrong in others, right? Like I think that Zimmer did kind of unleash Wilson as a pass rusher. I mean, I think he had 5 sacks last year again, which is the most he's had in his career. I think tied for the second with the most. But I think that the flaws that he has in coverage were more exposed than they had been at any point under Dan Quinn. And I think that that's more the issue is that, I think that's one of the things I was going to come in here and talk about with Wilson is that the problem with him early on in his career, and one of the reasons that it took a little while for him to become the starting safety, even when he was playing a lot of snaps earlier on when he was younger, was because he was just such a high variance player. Like you felt like the more you played him, the more chance there was that he was going to give up a big play or give up a touchdown. I think it also increased the chance that he was going to force a fumble or get a sack or tip a ball and get an interception. But it was still extremely high variance. And then as he got older, he kind of smoothed out the low ends and kind of continued with the high ends. It was a really great player because he was just playmaking, wasn't giving up too much on the back end that you really worried about him. And now it felt like, or at least last season, it felt like it started creeping back the other direction where it was just more high variance as opposed to, just a guy that was making plays while, not giving up a lot of plays. So the question is that because he's gotten older? Like we said, he's a step slower than he was a year previously. Or is it that he was playing in a new defense that, he was changing the angles of how he was playing things? He just exposed him more. Was it a combination of both? I think that's what we're going to find out a little bit more of in training camp and then obviously early in the season.
I'm hoping that we see him in the box more often this year because that's where he plays his best football at. We saw it with Mike Zimmer. We saw it with Dan Quinn. Heck, we even saw it all the way back with Mike Nolan in 2020. Like keeping him in the box, especially for a team that could have some linebacker issues like earlier in the year. Having Wilson closer to the line of scrimmage is great because that's when he can be a playmaker. Now let's talk about Malik Hooker because Malik Hooker was somebody who, for the last couple of years has played at a near Pro Bowl level for the Cowboys. Like we've been really excited about Malik Hooker. And then last year, it was the first year where he wasn't a liability in coverage. That's true strong. But I don't think he was necessarily a net positive either. I just thought he was okay. And they kind of need him to be better than okay, especially with all the injuries they have at corner.
Yeah, I do think that Hooker is more than Wilson where it feels like it's a little bit murky. I think with Hooker, it's pretty clear that the defense just didn't suit him very well. That he wasn't comfortable necessarily. This is a guy who's supposed to be playing with speed and instincts in his eyes. And I think that, just the lack of familiarity with what he was doing, as he was kind of learning this new defense, it took away enough of a margin in that it started to affect his ability to get to the angles he needed, get to the guys in time. And I think it just overall hurt his play. So I'm hoping more than even Wilson. I think I'm hoping that a more return to form this year with Hooker because he was playing really, really great football these last few years. And I just feel like last year felt like he took the hit of the transition between defenses more than most players. I think the safety position was one position where they changed a lot of what they were doing. And maybe it wasn't necessarily a great fit overall for their skill set the way it was with Dan Quinn. We'll see how that remains to change with Eberflus.
Here's my concern with Malik Hooker. He just turned 29 in April, which is not old for a defensive player in the NFL, right? However, that's one of the positions in the league where we've seen a lot of these guys, once they get to 29, 30, they really start to drop off. Now, Malik Hooker doesn't maybe have the snaps that, like, let's say Justin Simmons, who's bounced around the league now over the last couple of years. He hasn't played as many snaps, but this is somebody who has had a lot of lower body injuries as well. There's going to be a drop-off, and unfortunately with Hooker, I think it's going to happen fast. Is it this year? Is it next year? He's going into the final year of his contract. I'm just going to assume this is probably Malik Hooker's last year with the team. And then next year they're going to try either to draft somebody or maybe they hope the guys on the roster can eventually fill that spot.
Yeah, I think that they like these guys that are underneath them a lot. That's why they, brought back two of them or one and a half, I guess. I think, with Hooker, I didn't see a guy who I felt like physically had dropped off like, a lot from the year previous.
No,
so
I
and that's, remains to be seen. And I agree. You said he hasn't played as many snaps, but that's kind of almost a derogatory comment because he was injured a lot early in his career in the last part of his college career. So yeah, I agree. Like there's a chance that he could fall off the cliff quickly. I'm still more than hopeful. I'm still pretty certain that we're going to see a better Malik Hooker in this defense than we will last year. The question is it was a lot worse than it was previous.
A lot.
So how much back can we count on Malik Hooker from going, or is this the new norm for him moving forward?
And that's why I'm a little surprised that they didn't add any kind of veteran body or even a guy like Malik Hooker a couple years ago, like, hey, a former first-round pick, we're going to come in and try to revitalize your career. That just didn't happen. They're rolling with the same top four safeties that they had last year. We'll see if it can work.
I think they clearly like these backup guys a lot, and I think that they trust them, and I think they feel like they know more about these guys than other folks around the league, and so they're looking forward to transitioning to these other guys as their starters once the starters are done.
All right, let's talk about those other guys. Juanyeh Thomas and Markquese, two players that could be fighting for starting jobs in training camp. We'll get to them next. This episode is brought to you by Gametime. We've all been there logging on early and waiting forever for concert tickets to go on sale, only to lose your spot to a show that you've been dying to see. Live music should be about making memories, not dealing with the stress of ticket shopping. And that's where Gametime comes in. Gametime makes getting concert tickets faster and easier than ever before. And prices on the app actually go down the closer that we get to showtime. And you can save up to 60% off with their killer last minute deals. One of my favorite features on the app is the panoramic seat view. You're going to know exactly what your seats look like in the app before you buy. So take the guesswork out of buying concert tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen every single day. Let's talk about some key backups on this team. We're going to talk about Juanyeh Thomas, Markquese, two undrafted free agent signings from the same draft class, which is kind of funny. But let's talk about Juanyeh Thomas, who actually got off to a slower start, didn't do anything the first year of his career, kind of slowly, gradually getting on the field more and more. Do you think he has a realistic chance to be a starter this year?
I don't know. That's a good question, actually. I do think that one of the things that we should discuss, kind of just taking a step back for a second, because I think it affects these guys, is I do think that we're going to start seeing more 3 safety looks than we had previously, because I think as the NFL goes more and more into a leaning back into running the football a little bit more, I think you're going to need to start problem solving both how to defend the pass and how to defend the run. I think part of it is trying to just create more size in the margins, right? Like not necessarily fully leaning into 260-pound middle linebackers like they were in 1993. But I think that like having guys that are bigger body safety types as opposed to undersized nickels, right? Like that's why we've heard probably more and more about guys like Juanyeh Thomas getting reps in the slot, and Mokwamu being a guy that I think is they're looking at theirs. I think that they're going to want more of these safety bodies down, just in the mix, because they can play more run and pass equally, and I think that that's helpful for them. So I do think that the question you asked was, will Juanyeh Thomas be a starter, or can he compete to be a starter? I don't know if that's necessarily the case. I think that probably a little bit, but I do think for sure that we're going to see more of Juanyeh Thomas and Markquese, because they're going to start deploying them more often, certainly more often than I think we saw with Zimmer.
All right, let's start with Juanyeh Thomas, because I think, again, this is how I envision him. He is more of your potential slot guy that can kick out, but to me, he's a box safety. That's where he's played his best football, is near the line of scrimmage. So that I would assume Donovan Wilson is kind of the job that he's coming after. Would you agree with that?
I mean, I think that both of them kind of do both a little bit, but I mean, yes, that's the only issue here, is that it does feel like they are both being Markquese and Juanyeh Thomas. They are both.
Yes, they're both box safeties, but they're different types.
Because
let's just compare and contrast them a little bit, because Markquese obviously played linebacker for Dan Quinn in 2023. He's more of your run and chase and fly to the football, where I think Juanyeh can be the guy that matches up maybe more against tight ends and can do some slot stuff. I do think they both are better in the box, but they're different types of box safeties.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that of the two, Juanyeh is more of because of his coverage ability that you mentioned, he's probably more of the free safety body
of the two. Yes,
of the two
yes,
for sure.
Yes,
But I also feel like that Juanyeh probably plays better closer to the line of scrimmage just because that's his game. That's a better part of his game for sure.
Yeah. Markquese Bell played 700 snaps as a linebacker during the 2023 season, and then basically did nothing last year. You want to guess how many snaps Markquese Bell played?
I mean, it was disappointing. I definitely remember that. It's probably let me guess 150 maybe.
So Juanyeh Thomas and Markquese Bell combined to play 130 snaps on defense last year.
Oh
Mike
my
Zimmer must have
God.
hated those two.
Oh, on defense, yeah.
Markquese Bell played 36. He had one game where he played more than 4 snaps on defense.
Yeah, and again, that kind of goes to my conversation about what we were talking about. The safeties just didn't fit what Zimmer was trying to do, and I imagine that if Zimmer was here one more year, he was probably going to go ahead and get rid of most of this class, right?
I bet he would have went out and got his own safeties. Yep.
So I do think that's part of the reason that I'm a little more optimistic viewing this, because I feel like it is going to be more of a return to form and that these guys are getting closer to what they're playing previously. And in the case of Juanyeh Thomas and Markquese Bell, playing at all, which is ridiculous because both of these guys play significant snaps, overachieved at the points that they did, except for last year under Zimmer, and have earned opportunities to play more football. And Zimmer comes in and they played less ball. They played less snaps. So,
which shouldn't be all that surprising, knowing that Mike Zimmer likes to play veteran guys. Both Donovan Wilson and Malik Hooker played over 1,000 snaps. It sounds like we're just dogging out Mike Zimmer. We're not. I promise we're not. They got a lot more discipline in certain areas. Like I saw a stat over the weekend that the Cowboys had the fewest third down penalties on defense in the league. That was not the case under Dan Quinn.
Nope.
You could see one of the things that were Zimmer was really practicing and preaching, we're going to be way more fundamentally sound. And maybe that's why Juanyeh Thomas and Markquese Bell didn't play as much.
Maybe. Yeah. I mean, honestly, I think you're talking about Juanyeh Thomas. You talk about both these guys, neither one of them being free safeties or them being more box safeties. I think for Thomas, it's that he needs to play more snaps there. And I think that's the problem with what happened last year with Zimmer, right? Is that Thomas, in order to become a more disciplined, veteran player, he needs the opportunity to play snaps at free safety. So, I think they were kind of shooting themselves in the foot when they had talent in the safety room, and they weren't using it, to kind of spite themselves just to be more disciplined, which, I think they should be more disciplined. They got to find a balance, but you can't swing wildly from completely undisciplined Dan Quinn to only disciplined but untalented, Mike Zimmer. So it's tough.
Of these two safeties, Juanyeh Thomas, Markquese Bell, which one do you think has a better chance to become a starter this year, likely replacing Donovan Wilson?
Probably Juanyeh Thomas, just because his coverage ability is just, it's harder to find a little bit in the safety position. And I think that if Markquese Bell came in and with a limited role similar to what they've seen with Donovan Wilson at times, he would thrive. But I feel like one of the things that they are looking to replace in Donovan Wilson that they didn't love is that he's not always reliable in coverage, and no safety necessarily is, but I think Thomas has the opportunity to, when he becomes the starter, to be an even more reliable player in coverage than Donovan Wilson.
Yes, I would agree with you. It just feels like such a waste for Markquese Bell, considering I know what happened in the playoff game against the Packers, and I know his struggles as a pure run defender, but he was awesome in coverage as a linebacker. He made a lot of plays, and his speed was noticeable. It feels like you should be able to use that type of player, in nickel and dime situations. But I've got no idea. He's the 4th safety in this roster. I wouldn't be surprised if it's a similar snap count to what we saw last year. But I also wouldn't be surprised if the athleticism is just so much better than everybody else on the roster, and that's why we see him on the field more.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't be shocked if they just rotated these safeties more often. I think that's what we were looking for them to do in 2024 was, hey, what if we just played all 4 of these guys and kind of played them 50-50 a little bit, And
they probably should, considering the age of the other safeties.
That's right. And I think for Thomas, if you start working on him being the Hooker replacement, he could do that role eventually, and he could be a good free safety. But I think the issue right now is that he just doesn't have as much experience doing that. I think he needs opportunity to do that. And I think he could develop into a really good free safety. And I think Bell already could do the strong safety role, similar to what Wilson does. He's not quite, I think, the playmaker that Wilson is, but I think as a solid in the box run defender, can cover tight ends a little bit. I think he can do that already, and he's been a reliable player. Even when he wasn't great in the run game as a linebacker, that's not the same thing as not being great in the run game as a strong safety. He was really good in the run game as a strong safety. That's why they moved him to linebacker.
All right, let's talk about some young safeties on the bottom of the roster to watch out, including a player that the Cowboys absolutely love. We will get to that next. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen every single day. We also want to let you know that the Locked On NFL Top 100 will be released on Wednesday, July 16th at 10 a.m. Eastern on Locked On Sports Today. The NFL Top 100 was voted on by the NFL host, and there are some stunners on the list. Listen, I did my best. I took about 2 hours to fill out this list, so make sure you go check it out. Don't miss where your favorite players are ranked. Subscribe to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. All right, let's talk about some young safeties on this roster. We should mention Israel Mukuamu. He's in this list of safeties. We think he's going to be more of a corner this year, but he's obviously somebody that can play safety as well. But they do have 2 undrafted free agents, Alijah Clark from Syracuse, Zion Childress from Kentucky. Childress is more of a corner than he is a safety, but likely going to be in that slot job where I think Alijah Clark could just be a full-time safety for the Cowboys.
Yeah, I think Alijah Clark is probably a guy that they're eyeing to see if he could eventually become a full-time free safety, right? I think he played a lot of that at Syracuse. He moved around quite a bit, and it's a little bit of slot, a little bit of strong safety in the box. They kind of just, they clearly were like juggling their talent around too, because Barron was obviously, being juggled a little bit as well. So I think that they kind of, when you're a college like Syracuse and you have like probably 2 or 3 players, right, that are like a step or 2 above the rest of your players, you try to move them around to put them wherever you can to have the most impact. And I think that that's what they were doing with Barron and Clark, right? Is that these guys were valuable, and Clark is a guy that I think if he could just focus on one spot, right, for a little bit, they cross-train him a little bit, the box safety, but I think getting him an opportunity to see a lot of snaps, specifically at free safety, again, because of the kind of lack of true full backup at the position right now. I think we said Juanyeh still needs snaps there to kind of improve. I think Clark has had those snaps, probably more of those than Thomas in college. And so I think that that's probably a track if you wanted to work him there specifically as that kind of post safety. I think he would be a guy that could potentially thrive there with some opportunities.
I was talking to a friend of the show, Chad Ryder, who's been on here multiple times. He was talking about how Alijah Clark was one of his favorite late round picks in this class. Now, he ultimately went undrafted, but Clark is somebody who was a 3-time starter at Syracuse, played all over the field. He's just small. I mean, he's 187 pounds, and that's your biggest fear in the NFL is like, are you going to be able to handle playing in the big leagues against guys that are much bigger than you? Because it's pretty rare in today's NFL to have safeties under 200 pounds. Yeah. But to get ones that are under 190 pounds is very, very rare. So you've got to be able to cover in the slot, and you've got to be able to tackle really well. He does all of that kind of stuff, but you can see why he went undrafted. He's not a phenomenal athlete. He ran in the 4.5s at the NFL Combine. But there's something there, and we've already heard the beat reporters that have been out at the Cowboys OTAs and mini camps. They said that he looks really good. So he is somebody that I am keeping an eye during training camp.
Well, he better look good when the shorts are on, right? Like when you're 187 pounds, you better look a lot better than everybody else with the shorts on, because once the pad comes on, it becomes a little more difficult for you, right? It's tough when you're having to tackle a 200 115-pound wide receiver, and you're not even $190. So I think that's clearly the issue. I think that's probably why, honestly, you're looking at him more. I mean, look, it's safety and nickel. Those are both positions where it feels like you're starting to see bigger players, right? Like, because they're trying to, like I said, counteract what's going on in the run game. So Alijah Clark's going to really have to show something. Maybe he starts off in a role where he's playing sort of a passing down safety sort of stuff, right? Where he's like the nickel safety, and he's mostly just playing shell coverage stuff as a body back there. Because you worry about his ability to come downhill and try to tackle. There's running backs that are 240 pounds. There's a running back on this team that's 240 pounds. So it's going to be difficult to see. They're going to be, listen, they're going to be seeing each other, based on depth charts, just from what I'm looking at. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out in training camp, because we have to have some idea if this guy can really thrive in the NFL.
Last thing before we go.
Yeah.
There are some good safeties, or at least big name safeties, out on the open market right now, including Justin Simmons. Julian Blackman's been a multi-year starter for the Colts and has been a good player. Would you like to see the Cowboys sign one more safety, either before training camp or during?
Probably during, right? Like, I do think you want to see exactly, hey, is there more of a pep in the step in Hooker and Wilson with the change back to a more familiar defense? Does that help kind of ease the woes a little bit there? I think those are questions you need to get answered before you're going out in the free agency and signing guys that are even more unknown. Because that's the thing. At least these guys pretty well. You can project it a little bit more. With the undrafted, with the free agent guys, it's harder to know.
Yeah, I'm not opposed to them grabbing another safety, but it's got to be the right fit. I do think Justin Simmons is a better fit as a free safety if you feel like Malik Hooker has fallen off. So keep an eye on that. All right, that is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen every single day. Check out the channel, download the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We are free and available on all platforms. Follow Landon on Twitter at McCoolBCB. I'm at Marcus _Mosher, and we will see you right back here on Tuesday.